Hi, and welcome to Beyond Textbooks October webinar. My name is Brent Edwards. I'm BT's Assistant Director, and we're going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes talking about classroom management. This is a huge topic, so we've really boiled it down to a few key ideas, and I look forward to working with you. What we're going to talk about today, a very brief summary of why is classroom management important, and then the meat of our time together, we'll talk about the difference between procedures and routines. We'll talk about rules and consequences. We'll talk about signals and transitions. We'll also, as we go, address how are these things the same or different in this time of remote and virtual and hybrid instruction. We'll talk about the role and value of consistency, and there are definitely some classroom management tools on BT. I'll make sure you know where to find those. As always, when this is done, I'm going to ask you to refresh your browser, and then a quiz will pop up right up there. You're welcome to take that quiz, and if you do, a couple things will happen. You'll earn 30 minutes of professional development time for the time you invested today. And if you are watching this and taking that quiz within 48 hours of this going live, then we'll put your name in a drawing for $100. We give out 15 $100 checks as a small thank you for tuning in and watching with us today. All right, let's dive in. Why is classroom management important? We just really believe it's foundational to effective instruction. It is the bedrock, the fundamental foundational layer. Without effective classroom management, any teacher is going to struggle. It also really makes your class time more efficient and effective. Sometimes I felt like I never had enough time to get through curriculum and material. Part of that may have been that my classroom management wasn't as good as it could have been. It will maximize the time you have. It's also very true that proper classroom management will increase the safety and security of everyone in the classroom, students and adults. Strong classroom management brings with a lot of intangible values, like a feeling of success for the teacher, feeling of accomplishment, feelings of pride, greater teacher retention, less feelings of burnout, things of that sort. And then finally, I don't know about you, but 2020 has felt out of control to me. The world is crazy. Classroom management is one thing that we can control. You can shape and determine what your classroom looks like and sounds like and feels like, whether that's a physical classroom with students back in it or whether it's still in virtual or remote with online instruction. It's a part of our world that you can shape to meet your needs. I think that's valuable. Let's dive into the meat. The first thing I want to talk about are procedures and routines. And as educators, we say that phrase all the time, procedures and routines. Those are two different things. And I'm going to ask you to ponder very briefly, what's the difference between those two words? The way we like to describe it is this. Procedures are what you want students to do, the steps you want them to follow. Routines are what students do automatically every day. And sometimes I think of this with the example of an unmade bed. Every single one of us knows the procedures to make our bed. Straighten the sheets, top cover, square up the pillows, all those things. But whether or not it's a daily routine for you probably varies for some of us. In my house, I'll admit that it's not necessarily a daily routine, but I know the procedure of how to do it. So in our classroom, you have procedures for everything you want the students to do, and they may or may not be a routine for the students. The way you make a procedure become a routine is focused practice. Practice, practice, practice. Perfect practice makes perfect. Building habits, building good habits takes a long time. It takes a lot of repetition, somewhere between 8 attempts at practice, maybe even up to 28 or more if you're trying to replace a bad habit and replace it with a good habit. And the way you do that is to explain your procedure, rehearse it, and reinforce it. We joke, we call that for the ERR, and that's where the Karate Kid comes on. Mr. Miyagi had Daniel practice, 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 waxing on, waxing off. Well, we're going to do that in education with explain, rehearse, and reinforce. You may see this again as I explain, rehearse, and reinforce this message. Here are some common classroom procedures. You probably have all of these in your classroom. If not, you may want to consider adding them. And what I'd like you to start thinking about is, which of these procedures do you have firmly in place? Second question there, which of these procedures needs some to become a routine for the students? And then number 3 is a big new question. How do any of these procedures need to change or modify for this virtual and remote world? I'm going to encourage you to push pause on this presentation. There's a pause button, should be right down there in the corner. Push pause and reflect on these before you resume this presentation. All right, second main topic item we're going to talk about today, rules and consequences. We think that classroom rules and logical consequences are an important part of any classroom structure. Let's make sure we agree on what those two terms mean. Rules are expectations of proper behavior. They describe what you want students to do. We're either trying to encourage a good behavior or prevent or reduce a negative behavior. And then consequences are the result, what comes from following or not following that rule. Sometimes people think the word consequences has a negative connotation. I get that. There are positive and negative consequences. If you want to use a different word in your classroom, go for it. But I do encourage you to set up your classroom rules and consequences, something like what you see on the screen here. You see the set of classroom rules, and then this teacher has a set of positive consequences. If I follow the rules, these good things will happen. Not just if I break the rules, this is what will happen. Again, I'm going to encourage you to push pause on this presentation and reflect on your own classroom rules. What are they? Do you have them? Can you formally state them in a list of 3, 4, or 5 rules? And then are students clear on what the consequences are? Take some moments and reflect on that. Maybe jot down some notes, revise or update your rules and consequences. Also, while we're here, are there rules that need to adapt for virtual? Things like turning your camera on or off, or your microphone on or off, or how do you use the chat bar? This world of Zoom, there are definitely some new nuances. Consider how you want those to look. Push pause and then push play when you're ready to come back. Whatever you decide your rules and consequences are, your students will learn them and master them by explaining, rehearsing, and reinforcing. The final main area I want to talk about is the concept of signals and transitions, and I want to make sure that we're clear on those definitions as well. To us, a signal is a cue to a student, or to all students, that they need to do 2 things. They need to pause whatever they're doing, and they need to turn their focus and attention back to you. And then often a signal leads to a transition, and a transition is moving efficiently and smoothly from one activity or area to the next. You can use a signal anytime you need students' attention, and you can use a transition to move from one area to another. Here's some examples of common signals and transitions. Certainly there are more than this, but some common signals here. Call and response is something like when I say peanut, you say butter, peanut, butter, and that regroups and gathers up the class. And then transitions, I'm a really big fan of the first one here. Give your instructions in the form of, when I say go, I would like you to do this and do that and do that. That cues students to not jump up and start doing it as soon as you say those words, but instead be still, hear everything, and then go. Setting a timer, checking for understanding to make sure the students gathered all the information that you shared, using some sort of music, almost like a musical chairs. While the music is playing, you can move around the room. No matter what you choose for your signal or your transition, make sure that all students are with you so that you don't just give your signal and then blaze ahead while students have not yet paused and refocused and come back to you. I'm going to encourage you to again push pause here and reflect on your own signal or signals. Probably don't need more than 1 or 2, but decide what your signal is. And then your transition cues and transition instructions. Take a moment and decide what those are. Are you happy with what they are, or do you want to refine or revise them? Again, when you're ready, push play to resume. And no matter what you choose for your signal in your transition, those things will become routine for your students only if you explain, rehearse, and reinforce. All right, classroom management is an enormous topic. Literally, books have been written on it. That was very short and sweet, but those are 3 key areas that you can implement right away. You see in the notes on this agenda, what about remote learning? Please don't forget classroom management in this world of remote. It is just as important, maybe even more important. I posed a few questions to you as we went through, but reflect on every aspect of your classroom and your instruction if you're doing it in front of a computer screen. What will need to change or adapt to still manage and smoothly run your classroom, even if some portion of your students are at the other end of a computer screen? The role of consistency. You will need to practice this and model this and expect this over and over and over every time. If you are inconsistent, you know what? Students will be too. And then finally, I want to share some tools on BT that can help you with this. If you want a good, consistent daily bell work, that's a great procedure that will become a routine for getting class started. We have some daily math reviews and daily grammar reviews. Those are located by going to your grade level and then either math for the math review or the writing subject area for the grammar review. We really encourage you to use those every day. They're also available in Google format, which may be useful as you do virtual and remote. From the BT homepage, if you click into curriculum calendars and navigate backwards to your first week of school, you'll see a link to some additional resources and classroom management resources. You can always navigate back there even though it is no longer the first week of school. Also from the BT homepage, there's a container called Additional Resources. Inside Additional Resources is a subcontainer called Professional Practices, and inside there are a bunch of teacher-shared and teacher-created classroom management ideas and resources and materials. We encourage you to use those. And here's a small tip. I think the most important time to practice classroom management is the first week of school, and the second most important time to practice it is whenever you feel like it's necessary. You're going to have students returning to the classroom for the first time after being out for a while. That's really the first week of school, or the first week after fall break, or after winter break, or on just some random Tuesday when you feel like students need it. You can always practice these because that consistency truly, truly is key. Final thought, I'm just about done, so in a moment here, refresh your browser. That will populate the quiz. If you get 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 5 right, you'll earn that certificate, and we'll enter 15 people into that drawing. And then the last thing I want to share with you is the time and date of our next webinar, which is on the subject of number talks. Great structure to get kids more involved in learning math. November 18th at 3:30 Arizona time. I really look forward to talking to you then. When you hit refresh, you'll see that quiz, and you'll also see a link to a classroom management organizer that we're sharing with you. That's a great tool to continue to explore your own classroom management practices and thoughts and ideas. That's freely available right up there. We hope it's helpful. Have a great day.